Hi, my name is Dustin Messer. I am a priest at All Saints Dallas, and one of the things that has been core to our identity is creating a hospitable place where we can ask deep questions of life. Today, we are going to ask the question, how does reading fiction enlarge the soul? We are very honored to have Jessica Hooten Wilson join us today. Jessica is the Louise Cowan Scholar at the University of Dallas. She's author of several books, including Giving the Devil His Due, which was Christianity Today's Book of the Year award. She's currently getting one of Flannery O'Connor's unpublished novels ready for publication. Jessica, thank you so much for being with us.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, so I just said a few things about sort of your professional resume, but can you tell us a little bit about you and what you do in your life and that kind of thing?
Sure. I'm a teacher first and foremost. I've been teaching college probably, I can't do time, 15 years maybe. But before that, I was actually teaching at a classical school in Fort Worth. And so I've taught elementary school, I've taught junior high, I've taught high school. And so really, I try to see my teaching as K through adult. What are we doing starting at very young ages? How does that then affect our lifelong love of learning or not? And going all the way up to people now who maybe didn't have the experience in college they wanted. And how can I then also offer the riches of our intellectual tradition to adults? And so I really see myself as a teacher, kind of sharing the love of reading and sharing the love of great books all the way through.
Yeah, you mentioned people who didn't get the education perhaps that they wanted. And I think that's probably true for most people, that there's been a real emphasis over the past 50 years on return to STEM education, and our education's gotten more sort of technocratic. Um, so what do you think? I'm going to ask you how literature enlarges the soul, but how do you think that sort of specialization and scientification of our society has affected our souls?
Well, I don't want to downplay the great things that STEM does because I think the beauty, if you've ever read Stratford Caldecott's book on beauty for truth's sake, right? There's so much beauty in the maths and sciences, but we have made absolutely every discipline into its own specialized silo, and we've made everything into application. And so even the maths and sciences are suffering because not as far as recruiting students, but they're suffering in the sense that we have reduced them to, are you useful to me? If this math is useful to me, then I will pay attention. If this science is useful to me, then I will pay attention. And there's so many riches even in maths and sciences. And the same goes for literature, but it's probably easier to see application in the maths and sciences. And because our entire framework has been about utility, that really has become the problem. And so we've changed everything into utility and tried to understand how it is that we can extract things for our benefit from learning literature, from learning history. And when we can't find that immediate benefit, then we just denounce it as unnecessary to whatever it is that we're doing. And I think in that sense, we're really missing the purpose of human life. We're really changing the story of who we are and how we were made to be.
Yeah, so what is that purpose of human life, and how does reading really good fiction help us live into that vision of the good life?
Yeah, well, the end of all human life is to enjoy God. Right? I mean, that's what we were made for, is that enjoyment. And that's the story we should be telling and participating in. Instead, what we've done is we've misplaced this use and enjoyment.
Hmm.
And literature reminds us again of what that enjoyment looks like because it gives us these hints or signs of beauty, of truth, and goodness that are ultimately reflections of course, that divine enjoyment we will be in the presence of forever. And we're getting to experience it here in these stories. Stories have a way of kind of capturing both active purposes of the human life. So if we think of the enjoyment as the contemplative purpose of the human life, then the active realm, it should be a humanizing influence and a humanitarian, right? So wisdom and justice, as the Old Testament would show us. And so literature can really do both of those things. It can help cultivate wisdom in the human soul, and then also say, because you've now been freed, go then and free others. And that's what justice, the impulse towards justice, should look like, is to liberate others with this liberation that you yourself have received from the stories that have shown you a bigger world, a grander vision of things than maybe you were accustomed to when you were just limited to your own eyes.
Yeah, I love that. And even the way you frame stories, there's a Shakespeare scholar at Virginia, I forget his Paul Cantor, maybe.
Okay.
He
I know.
talks about okay, yeah, he talks about not being too snobbish with like reading per se, because obviously he's a Shakespeare scholar, and his kind of big point is it's the stories that we need. And he says, like Breaking Bad or any good story we have on TV, because Shakespeare has this sort of pop culture rather than high culture tinge to it. And
Mhm.
so he sort of is just like, give us good stories and let reading or whatever the way those stories get to us fade to the background a little bit. But I like what you said there about the impulse towards justice. I think one thing reading good stories or engaging good stories does is it takes us outside of our world. It asks us to put ourselves in the shoes of
Mhm.
another. Do any stories or books come to mind that really help you see the world through another's eyes?
Yes, absolutely. And I want to step in on the Cantor. I mean, I don't know his exact source. I really believe that literature should be a democratic endeavor and that we should see these riches of literature as open to everyone. At the same time, I think we also have to lift ourselves up. There are certain stories that are going to be eternal and they're going to challenge us and ask something from us, and they're not going to be as easy to consume as pop culture. And it doesn't mean that there's an elitism there. It means that they are doing something to the human soul that is different from entertainment.
Yeah.
Right. In that way, we have to differ enjoyment from entertainment. And so I wouldn't want to trivialize what Shakespeare and Dante and all of these kind of known canonical sources offer us that is vastly different. It does give us the lens to appreciate some of the things in pop culture that we can still enjoy, but we're enjoying them in a different way. We're enjoying them in kind of a superficial pleasure way and not in a transformative way in which they're really demanding or asking something from us. So that was just kind of a side note. Um, but what was the question you were actually asking? Because I wanted to like respond to Cantor first.
No, yeah, that was really helpful. I think, yeah, that was very helpful. Thinking of stories that I was a teacher for many years, and I would always think of that in terms of there are things where we reach and then things we stand on. And the stand on you can sort of assume, but we always want to be reaching as well. That was a really helpful distinction. The question I think was how do stories maybe help us see the world through another's eyes and be more sympathetic? And can you think of any good
Mhm.
stories? I kind of just want to hear you recommend some books. I think obviously you probably point to Flannery O'Connor and others, but what are some good books that help us see the world through another's eyes?
Yeah, I mean, my go-to definitely. You can see my list. I have a lot of lists online of the classics. I mean, Dostoevsky's Brothers Karamazov is one of the great life changers for me. Flannery O'Connor, of course, anything by Flannery, but starting with her complete stories, she's a master short storyteller. But also this summer, I was reading, or sorry, this spring, I was reading A Lesson Before Dying by Ernest Gaines, and that was tremendously influential on my imagination. Just seeing from the perspective of not only the narrator in that story, who is a teacher and trying to teach a man on death row who is innocent, how to become a man, really, because this man has accepted society's reduction of him to be less than human.
Mm,
And so you have a black man being convicted of a crime that he didn't commit, but a small white town that was really segregated and needed a scapegoat. They needed to kill somebody for the death of another white man, and so they chose him in a sense, and it's really heartbreaking. But getting into his mind, what is it? When you're looking and facing death, and it's inevitable, and you have a week to live. I mean, it's kind of like a contemporary Boethius story,
mm.
right? What is it that really makes us human, that is worth even these final days, and what does that look like? So that was a really transformative work for me, not only to get into the perspective of 1940s Black citizens in America in small town Louisiana, but also for a larger picture of the humanity there.
Yeah.
What we tell each other when we're facing death about what it means to be human.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. I haven't read that. I'm excited to read that. So,
Yeah.
suppose you've been really generous with your time. Maybe this would be a good last question. What advice would you give people who, kind of going back to the first question, didn't have the education that they would have liked in the sense that they were the stories, the really good, deep, rich stories were not given to them. They would like to expose themselves to good, true, beautiful
Mhm.
stories. What would you say to them? How could they sort of dip their toe into this world of imaginative literature?
Yeah, I would say first you're going to have to begin with your preferences, but think about the things that you enjoy, the kinds of stories that you enjoy, and then try to find their literary counterpart rather than the one that's going to be the most popular on the bookshelves. So for
Mm,
example, if you really love stories that take place in the Midwest and you're really trying to get into stories about the pioneers or something, go with Willa Cather instead of, the latest Amish romance or something. I don't know what's out there right now, but tried to reach, as you said, a little bit. And the reason why I would say this, it's going to demand more of you when you're not used to it.
mm,
Augustine says in Confessions, even to a sick person, sweet bread will taste bitter. So
mm.
something that is really good for you, but you're not used to tasting it, it's going to be a struggle. But in our current culture where we accept easier things as better than hard things, I think we need to retrain ourselves that the hard things are more worthwhile and more long lasting than the easy things. And so I would say, know that something good is happening when you show the patience to get through a text that's not immediately gratifying to you, and keep on with it. Be patient, read it slowly, don't get frustrated, and relish every word.
Well, that was really good exhortation. I'm going to throw out my Amish romance novels after this. If you have been watching this and you would like to talk more about this beauty in life and literature, I would love to talk with you. My email is dustin@ascdallas.org. Our guest has been Jessica Hooten Wilson. Jessica, thank you so much for being with us.
Absolutely. Thanks, Dustin.
Go in peace.